Hello Internet, Seth Skorkowski, and welcome to part 9 of our enormous 10-part overview / war story for the Epic Traveller campaign, Secrets of the Ancients. In today's exciting episode, we're racing toward the final confrontation in Chapter 9, The Dark Gate. The chapter itself is 27 pages, but once you remove the maps and the plans for 4 new ships, it's really only 18 pages long. However, it has the potential of being one of the longest chapters for players to complete because it's really just a giant sandbox across 2 subsectors. So the players can go a lot of different ways with this one, as the player characters are just jumping world to world, desperately hunting their quarry, while very likely being hunted themselves. Now that said, this one we finished way faster than I had anticipated. My players pulled off a really clever plan, completely bypassing a huge chunk of this chapter. I mean, there was a couple things I had really been looking forward to and put some prep in for, and I'm never going to get to see them in a game, but that's cool, I guess. I mean, they did a really good plan. But we had a lot of fun with this one, but there are a few minor issues, especially with the map, that referees are really going to want to look out for before they run this, so that's what we're going to talk about today. My tips, my praises, and my criticisms as a game master who has successfully run this chapter. But first, let's reintroduce our heroes. They are Lily, our Vargr pilot who is in serious trouble for abandoning her robot. Benjamin, retired naval captain, decorated war hero who isn't quite feeling himself at the moment. Uthe Background, our mechanic, former spy and newlywed husband. And Peachy Brevis, scientist, computer whiz, who despite being voted most likely to betray the party, has proven he won't. At least not yet. They're joined by Uthe Background, a primitive hunter from a red zone world who learned how to fly an ancient starship before learning how to roll down a car window. Dr. Ora Brevis, celebrated archaeologist, planetologist, and straight-up gangsta. Amelia, an astromech droid who desperately wants to tase somebody. Killjag, Peachy's crew droid who is thrilled to finally have somebody to cook for. And Squirt, an adorable seed spitter who crapped on Peachy's pillow because he abandoned it for the last few months. Their ship is the Star Hunter, a pimped-out tech level 15 far trader that's going to look a whole lot more at home where it's about to go. But before we go any further, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. So any players in the audience, please stop here. But send your game masters this way to learn about running this campaign for you. But if you keep going and you spoil yourself, the Church of the Chosen Ones will pay you a visit. Okay, travelers, let's get to work. When we last left our heroes, they'd escaped a secret Imperial prison. Benjamin's visions from Grandfather have told him that they need to find 7's secret base somewhere in the Uthe subsector, a garden world inhabited by an enslaved race of amphibious sea slugs. After raiding the Beck's Halo for their old equipment, their non-human crew, and a bunch of Peachy's drones, the next step was figuring out just where in the hell they were going. This chapter opens up with Grandfather taking control of the host, in our case Benjamin. They have a lot of questions, and he probably has some answers for them. Grandfather explains that killing 7 requires simultaneously destroying both it and its mental archive. While 7 is currently destroyed in the Pocket universe, they have only a brief window of time to find and destroy this archive. He informs them that there's a hidden cache of Ancients equipment down on Pixie and tells them where to find it. Now, at any point in the future, Grandfather can take control of his host. However, that comes with some dangers, namely a permanent drop to the host's endurance stat. Now, I wasn't going to drop Benjamin's endurance for this first one, but any future times that they might call on Grandfather to get his help or get themselves out of some sort of pickle, or Grandfather feels the need to take over his host to get them out of some sort of jam they've gotten into, then yes, I definitely would reduce the host's endurance stat at that time. Also, just a note, if Grandfather's host were to die, his mind could transfer to any of the other travelers, so the host doesn't get any sort of plot armor or anything like that by being the host. They can still die just the same as anyone else.
Guys, it sounds like there's a loot cache down on the planet to make up for all the cool Ancients tech that the Imperials stole from us.
Sounds good to me. Down on the planet, a concealed teleporter brings the travelers deep below the surface. Inside is a bunch of human and Vargr clothing, armor, treasure, including $250,000 in cash. There's also several ancient shimmer suits, enough for everybody, and these things are super duper cool. In addition to serving as high-pressure battle dress that grants a +4 to both strength and dexterity, they completely absorb all laser attacks, while all other attacks are reduced to 1/4 damage. And this got me wondering if it absorbs absorbed energy attacks, or was it just lasers that it absorbed? So I checked the first edition version of the campaign, and in there is specified that fusion, rocket, and plasma attacks did a combination of energy and kinetic damage, so they inflicted 1/16 damage. So that's what I went by, that the suits absorbed all energy damage. We'll also find several disintegrator gauntlets, enough for everybody. These things are super duper awesome. They use either the unarmed melee or the energy gun skills to use, and they ignore all armor and do 46 damage and have unlimited ammo.
Guys, I think I just found my new favorite gun. Yeah. Hey, what's that?
I also threw in a few fusion guns here just because, why the hell not? I mean, we are suiting up for the final battle, so might as well give them some cool toys. Benjamin felt drawn to a large cylindrical object that was only slightly radioactive. No one knew what it did, but Benjamin felt a compulsive need to take this with him. Trusting grandfather just knew what he was doing. After gathering their loot, the travelers headed back up to the Star Hunter. But the next question was, where in the hell are they going? So based off of Benjamin's visions, we know that it's a garden world with a gas giant and in the Uthe subsector. So searching the ship's library, the travelers can quickly determine there are 8 garden worlds in the Uthe subsector, which the adventure conveniently gives us this list of them. And I wish it had given us a list with the trade codes for everything, all the worlds in the Uthe subsector, but we only get it for these 8. So looking at this, the travelers can quickly rule out Triad and Galas, or some other world, because those 2 lack gas giants. Also, while the scout survey data on this subsector isn't the best because it's outside the Imperium, we can still rule out one more world because we have enough Imperial traffic there and it's well surveyed enough to know that the moons do not match the specifications of Benjamin's visions. So that leaves us with 5 planets that need to be checked out for 7's hidden base. However, instead of simply just handing all my players this useful list of 8 garden worlds and letting them go through it like the adventure assumes, I decided to let them do a little bit of detective world themselves while also practicing out their UWP skills by simply handing them the subsector map and let them go through all the UWPs and figure out which worlds it was. And that is when I encountered a couple problems. The first problem is that on the map, Triad clearly shows that there is a gas giant there, which it's not supposed to have. Okay, annoying, but I at least caught that one before the session, and I photoshopped that out. And as always, you can find my updated maps and handouts at the download link in the video description below. However, the problem that I didn't catch before the session was the qualifications for a garden world. So according to the Traveller Core book, a planet qualifies as a garden world if the planet size is 6 through 8, atmosphere is 5, 6, or 8, and hydrographics are between 5 and 7. Okay, easy enough. However, pulling up the 8 planets and checking their UWP codes, the only one that actually qualifies as a garden world is Zoe. The 7 others do not meet one of the requirements to make it a garden world, so what the hell, guys? So my players, they're going through the subsector map, they're checking the UWPs to find all the garden worlds, and they're ruling out all the worlds that are supposed to qualify according to the campaign. And I finally realized what was going on in this problem with the UWPs, so I ended up just handing them the list of 8 garden worlds that the adventure says are garden worlds and just apologized for my mistake and really wish I hadn't done that. I really don't know how this mistake even happened. 6 of the 8 worlds do qualify as agricultural worlds, and the 2 that don't are simply because they lack the population to be ag worlds. And not even the Traveller Wiki lists these planets as garden worlds, so I don't know if this was an addition problem from an earlier edition or what. But Game Masters, just be aware and give your players the list of 8 worlds, and if they check out the worlds and say that they don't qualify as actual garden worlds according to the UWP, but you can just say it's close enough to the parameters that were given in the vision. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is an actual garden world by the Imperial standards, but it would have been a garden world by most standards, and we'll just kind of go with that. Next is simply figuring out what information that the travelers knew about the Uthe subsector itself. The adventure offers some information the travelers should just know if they have an astrogation of 2, xenology of 1, or just simply announce that they're going to check the ship's library to see what it has on it. But all of this is in the text of the adventure, so me being me, I made it a handout that I could give to my players. The next step is figuring out how it is they're going to get there. The Uthe subsector is forward, or up, from the Regina subsector, and the travelers begin on Pixie. Now, the adventure does not know what ship the travelers are going to have at this point in the adventure. Maybe they have the Star Hunter, maybe they have a Jump 2 scout ship that Orissa gave them, maybe they have something else, but very likely we're going to be looking at a Jump 2 ship. If that's the case, a Jump 2 ship lacks the ability to just jump straight there. It might need to take the long way around, such as Pixie to Bougine, then to Ferry, back over to Beck's world, up to Knorb, and then up into the Uthe subsector through Pandren. Now, there are a lot of variants that they could take, but the idea is that they're likely going to be going down and then up into the Uthe subsector, and it's the traveler's job, of course, to plot whatever course it is that they're going to take. Also keep in mind that they might be escaped fugitives at this time, just trying to avoid the law because they just broke out of prison, so consider using the jumping on the run rules from Chapter 3 that we've previously used. The adventure gives us information and adventure hooks for several of the worlds along these likely paths, such as on Dentist, the travelers might con or break their way into a scout base and get the most current up information on the Uthe subsector, which that will allow them to quickly determine that Zoe is the world from Grandfather's visions. Now, of course, if they were given Galen's Imperial warrant and they just simply walked out of prison, they can just simply walk into the scout base and ask for it because they've got, the power of the Emperor at their command, and they can just simply ask for whatever they want. My favorite mini-adventure is on Ferry, where the travelers are offered a job to hijack a cargo of arms being smuggled in because there's a war going on. However, the twist is that this is actually an Imperial Black Ops mission arming one side of the war that they're not supposed to be involved in, and now the travelers are facing off against 6 Imperial Marines on an illegal ship and an illegal shipment. Now, Game Masters, of course, can use the adventure hooks from Chapter 3 that they hadn't used previously. Now, there is no telling what the players are going to be doing in this one. Maybe they'll steal a brand new ship or possibly get a faster ship somewhere. Maybe they'll engage in some piracy. So, not knowing which route that they'll go, I was prepared for just about any path that they could possibly do, and I was ready for them. That was up until Peachy said,
"Guys, instead of making a bunch of jumps through the system and wasting a bunch of time trying to get there, why don't we just pick up a collapsible fuel bladder? That way we can go 3 or 4 jumps before refueling and just fast track our way into Uthe."
"Holy crap, you're a freaking genius!"
"Yeah, I know."
So, hopping up to Eurus, they picked up a 20-ton collapsible fuel tank, turning their ship's hold into a spare tank and allowing them to make an extra 1 parsec jump before they needed to refuel. And while they were there, Peachy also picked up a half dozen or so adorable obelpans, which he then periodically released in the ship for Squirt to murder.
"Did you just infest our ship with a bunch of fluffy rats?"
Squirt likes hunting them.
"I knew you'd betray us."
All fueled up, the travelers left Eurus, jumped 2 parsecs, leaving the 3rd Imperium and the spinward marches, and then on to the Uthe subsector of the Vargr extents. And then one more jump, the Vargr world of Forrodhkhokh. I guess that's how you pronounce that. My human tongue has trouble with Vargr words that I've never heard aloud. Now, while they were in jump space, and because they were once again fugitives, Peachy was tasked with updating the ship's transponder, just like he'd done in Chapter 3. And because this wasn't his first time updating this ship's transponder, I gave him a boon die, because he might remember exactly how he did it, which he evidently did not need that boon die because he absolutely nailed this roll, because he got an effect of 5, meaning that they got to have 5 different names that they could choose for the ship. So each player character got to choose 1 name, and one of the player characters got to choose 2 names. So instead of New Avalon or Ryachi, the Star Hunter's transponder now reads as Squishy Godship, or His Majesty's Right Hand of Glory, or Gita, or Ixer. Both of those are Vargr words, by the way, or His Pleasure Ship HPS Strawberry Daiquiri, and I'll let you figure out which character chose which name.
"I'm just wondering which of us chose the name His Pleasure Ship Strawberry Daiquiri."
Huh?
"Yeah, that's a real head-scratcher there, Ada."
I'm just going to keep calling it Star Hunter because that's what everybody kept calling it. Also, during these jumps and much of the journey until they find Seven Space, Benjamin was taken over by Grandfather, who's rebuilding and repairing that device that they found on Pixie, and having the travelers pick up various high-tech components at starports along the way. Now, Benjamin is partially sort of aware of what's going on during this, kind of like watching himself through a dream. But he was able to figure out that this artifact is a star trigger, an ancient's weapon that alters stars, causing them to flare or even explode. The same technology that the Darians, everyone's favorite space elves, accidentally unleashed on their own sun thousands of years ago, nearly wiping themselves out. Benjamin fully trusts Grandfather, but he isn't comfortable with the fact that Grandfather is preparing a super weapon capable of destroying an entire solar system. Now, Grandfather assured him that this is a weapon of only last resort and only going to be used if they fail.
Wow, no pressure, but I at least know if I die, there'll be a big bang to go with it.
Okay, so let's talk about the Uthe subsector. It's located in the Vargr extents. Now, unlike the Third Imperium, which all swear allegiance to a single imperial government, the Vargr extents are a haphazard collection of thousands of planets in the Vargr territories. Many of the planets are completely independent, or there's a bunch of small multi-world coalitions and empires that exist within it. The only multi-planet alliance in the Uthe subsector is the 40th Squadron, which is ruled by the naval officers of that fleet. Again, this portion of this adventure is just a big sandbox. The travelers have a few possible worlds for Seven Space to choose from, but they're going to be gathering information to confirm or rule those suspects out as they go system to system, and they're able to ask about the different worlds around them. So we get various mini adventures and hooks for different worlds. They might get attacked, they might get exhorted by corsairs. We get stats and deck plans for 4 new Vargr ships that we'll be encountering, which is pretty cool. I love getting new traveler ships. Game masters who have a copy of Aliens of Charter Space Volume 1 might find some of the information on Vargr culture, history, and equipment very useful to have for this chapter. Now, one aspect of Vargr culture that's important for this campaign is the Church of the Chosen Ones. Now, this is a religion that says that while the ancients modified many species, including human, they created the Vargr, making them the superior species and the chosen ones of the ancient, destined to inherit the galaxy once their creators return. However, what most people don't know is that the Church of the Chosen Ones is really just a mouthpiece for Seven. Seven either created this religion or just simply took it over to turn the Vargr into his loyal followers, just like Grandfather did back at the Pocket Universe. So it makes sense that his clone son would do the exact same thing here. And while the Vargr extents is made up of thousands of completely independent worlds, that religion is found across the entire extents, uniting them in one way that no single government could possibly do. So, several months ago, shortly after the travelers encountered Seven in the Bujin system, the Church of the Chosen Ones told their followers to be on the lookout for the travelers and everybody keep an eye out for them. Okay, so back to this adventure. Arriving in the Uthe subsector, the travelers landed on Forrodhkhokh, a world controlled by the 40th Squadron, and holds the Navy in such high esteem that officers are granted land estates. After a mild customs faux pas, the travelers realized that only Peachy and Dr. Brevis spoke the Vargr language. Otter then picked up a language chip so he could also talk to the locals. They spent a few days there. Lily took Dr. Brevis dancing at a Navy bar, Otter took Hilda to an Applebee's, but the Vargr slant on the food meant that it didn't really taste right to him.
You and Mom were out really late last night, but when you got back, what was all that noise coming out of your bedrooms? Yeah, you don't want to know.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Mom!
Otter returned to Applebee's with his guitar and did a killer performance of Bimmy Juffet covers. Benjamin made several contacts among the naval officers, even trying to help one of them out with an engineering problem, but that didn't really work out for him. Peachy's research ruled out Theaview as a planet with 7 space, which left them only 3 potentials left. It was when they were powering up to leave the starport that 2 800-ton corvettes and a 400-ton corsair dropped out of the sky and hovered above the Star Hunter with their guns trained. They were hailed by a Commander Raruko of the 40th Squadron, using the travelers' correct names. She informed them that Prince Aethgors, head of the 40th Squadron, had demanded to speak with them. She ordered them to cut their engines and stand down, and if they cooperate, no harm will come to them.
Do you think we could make it if we tried to run? Yeah, not a chance.
There is little to no chance that the travelers are going to be able to escape this situation. The 3 ships are all bigger, faster, more heavily armed, and that's before we even get to the heavy fighters that they can launch. The 40th Squadron isn't taking any chance with the travelers. The captain boards the ship and with half-dozen Vargr Marines. She's very professional and polite, and she says that the 40th has ships across the subsector looking for the travelers with orders to bring them to Prince Aethgors on Forrodhkhokh. We're just going to call this one Planet 3 because I can't pronounce it. She doesn't know why, but she suspects that the travelers were either spies or weapons merchants.
Okay, but how do you know who we are?
Yeah, nobody should even know what we look like, that we're even coming. This don't add up. Now, she has descriptions of the travelers as they appeared at the gas giant Komesh in Chapter 4, meaning that they included the cosmetic surgery that they had done back during Chapter 3. It showed what they looked like now. She also has information on both Hilda and Dr. Brevis, who were not with the travelers when they started this entire thing. Now, the idea here is that any images or descriptions of them would have come when the travelers spoke to Uncle Vlyn when he was aboard 7. However, because the travelers spent several days aboard this derelict ancient ship that was infected with this AI virus, I think that's when the AI was sent that burst of information to 7 before they jumped away. That data packet would have included hours of holographic footage of the travelers, the Star Hunter, and everything they said while they were exploring the ancient ship. So all of that information would have been sent off to the Church of the Chosen Ones. So Game Masters, you might even have Forrodhkhokh show identification pictures and biometrics that she was given to identify the travelers. And so even though that the backgrounds on these images have been removed, when the travelers look at them, they can probably determine that those pictures of them were taken aboard the ancient ship, and they can kind of figure out that maybe that is when those pictures were made. Now, providing that the travelers don't try to escape or fight their way out of this, she escorts the travelers to Aethgors' world. Now, for this portion, the travelers are 4 parsecs away from Planet 3. Now, Star Hunter being a jump 2, it's going to take at least 2 weeks for them to make this journey, and during that time, they're going to be isolated in a jump bubble and not able to talk to anybody. So to speed all this up and give them a little bit more social interaction and cut down on the chances of them trying to do some sort of harebrained scheme to escape all of this at the last second, or change their jump coordinates at the last moment and jump to a different place, I made a modification to Captain Forrodhkhokh's Corvette. So I made it 1,000 tons instead of 800, removing the 2 small hangars and giving a docking space large enough to fit the Star Hunter inside of. So she asked for just expediency's sake, hey, why don't you pull the Star Hunter into my ship and I'll travel you there in our Jump 4 Corvette, which greatly speeds up the time while also allowing the travelers a chance to interact with the crew and get to know the captain and everybody else. Now, arriving in the system, the Star Hunter undocks from the Corvette and lands in Aethgors' giant palace floating in the skies above the planet. They were taken to a throne room, both resembling a stone and wood barbarian's hall and a Tech Level 14 command center. There they meet Aethgors, leader of the 40th Squadron, and with a grin of sharp needle-like teeth, he casually calls the travelers the Chosen Ones of the Chosen Ones, and then invites them to sit down, offering them food and drink and conversation. He explains that the Church of the Chosen Ones, which is very popular among the 40th Squadron, but he doesn't subscribe to that faith. He mostly just tolerates it as something that the people beneath him enjoy. Now, when the Church came to him demanding that the Navy locate the travelers, he knew that something was kind of strange about this. So he's invited the travelers just to simply ask them why it is the Church would dedicate so much effort and his entire Navy to finding 6 travelers and just a 200-ton far trader. Now, he is a very good judge of character, and his throne room is wired with advanced lie detectors, so lying to him is going to be extremely difficult to do. And if the travelers don't lie, or at least they don't fail any of their deception rolls, and they just simply trust him and tell him how 7 poses an imminent threat and that they're looking for the secret base, Aethgors will gladly help the travelers out, even offering them his personal Corvette, a warship, to go finish this mission.
Trust you? Yeah, right. Buddy, I ain't telling you squat.
On the flip side, if the travelers are caught lying or become hostile, Aethgors will gladly hand them over to the Church of the Chosen Ones. Now, my players, being my players, did not trust him enough or say enough to ask for his help in any way. So they got about 90% of the way towards gaining his trust, but not quite enough. They just didn't seal the deal. So Aethgors remained pretty neutral toward them. And then the doors to the hall opened and a procession of 9 priests walked inside. They'd received a tip that the travelers were there, and they offered offer to take the travelers to the Temple of the Chosen Ones, where all secrets will be revealed.
I don't know, guys. You think we should trust them?
Lily's keen Vargr nose picked up a familiar scent, one that she remembered very well but never had actually smelled herself before. Among the hooded priests she spied Navor, born of the first litter of Vargr 300,000 years ago, and littermate with Gavor, whose memories Lily had experienced in a previous chapter. She remembered how he had sided with Seven during that final war, and felt that betrayal and that hatred welling up inside of her. Seeing the recognition on Lily's face, Navor drew a fusion pistol from his robes, and the room exploded into combat. Now, we have three types of opponents here. Navor, whose stats are actually way too low, especially if he's in a shimmer suit like the Travelers are. He is a 300,000-year-old agent. He should be more like Kale from Chapter 7 with several 15 stats and psionics. Next, we have the Assassins, which there are 3 of. They have auto-fire Gauss rifles. Then we have 5 Moot Priests armed with laser pistols. Now, being that the fact that the Travelers are in shimmer suits that can absorb all laser damage, these things pose no threat at all to any of the Travelers outside of Amelia, who is beginning to regret her decision to come with them here. Now, this scene is meant to be bloody and over the top. Aethgors' guards circled around him to protect him, but he didn't get involved because the Travelers hadn't won him over. So while the Vargr laser pistols cannot hurt the Travelers, I sent any missed shots into Aethgors' guards, forcing them to defend themselves as, different shots started hitting them. Now, we are supposed to go nuts with this fight, blowing out walls and hopefully even cracking a grab platform on this palace. So if all your players are wearing shimmer suits, I say you up this. The Assassins, they have 8 points of armor from their vac suits. Go ahead and up that. Give them Ancients and Counter suits from Chapter 4. Double the number of Assassins. Give 1 or 2 of them fusion pistols, double the number of regular priests, just choking the air full of laser fire. I also gave several of the priests a single grenade, just to spice things up a bit and add a little bit of smoke and mayhem to all of this. It took a while to do because he was wearing a shimmer suit himself, but eventually Navor was knocked unconscious from all the damage.
Prepare to die, jerkface. Wait, don't kill him. We'll take him with us.
I had thought that they wanted to keep Navor alive for questioning or mind probes, but that wasn't the case at all. The Travelers knew that what allowed the precursors to live hundreds of thousands of years was their ability to download and come back into cloned bodies. So the Travelers feared that if they killed him, Navor would just come back, but also already be back at Seven's base waiting for them and tipping everybody off that they were on their way. The adventure doesn't hint that this is even a possibility, and I hadn't even considered this one myself, but given what the Travelers knew, I thought it was a pretty great idea and a possibility if they had killed him, so they decided not to. With his floating palace and seriously damaged and several of his guards dead, I decided that while they hadn't convinced Aethgors to fully trust them, he'd at least throw them a bone here by telling the Travelers that he suspects the Church's secret base is on the planet Zoe. And with that, the Travelers loaded up onto their ship, jammed Navor into a cryoberth to keep him alive, and flew out of there. Now, after a few weeks' travel, they arrived at Zoe, which is exactly as the world in Grandfather's vision. It's a low-population world with a few thousand Vargr and several million sea slug sophins that they use as slaves, toiling away in sweatshops. There's a few ways the Travelers can discover where Seven's secret base is hidden, and a few characters on the planet that the Travelers can meet, but my group decided to stay distant from the planet. They deployed Peachy's advanced prone drones to make a surveillance net around this entire system. After a couple days, a Vargr courier registered to the Church of the Chosen Ones arrived. Instead of heading off to the starport, it flew to a remote part of the ocean and dove into the water. Sensors detected a force shield enveloped the ship as it descended 11 kilometers beneath the surface. Detecting the base itself requires a 14 sensors check, but remember, the Star Hunter's advanced sensors give it a bonus, and at least my Travelers, they still had the G-band sensor that gave them another. Their initial scan had failed, but now armed with the location that the ship had gone, a second check found a huge ancient structure and energy source deep within the planet. Getting down there can be tricky. The pressure of 11,000 meters of water would just crush any ship. Now, one option would be hijacking an enemy ship to get the codes or whatever it is that enable the force bubble that protects it, but there was another option that the Travelers can do, and because my players didn't initially think about it, because they probably are not as familiar with all the equipment and everything that's in the game, I allowed Benjamin to make a tactics roll here to see if he would think about this, and he made it, and I reminded him that the shimmer suits could easily handle the pressure here. And all of his years in the Imperial Navy, he was very familiar with deploying Marines from low orbit.
Guys, this might sound crazy, but what about a halo jump?
Fuck
yes! I mean, sure.
Because Amelia could pilot the Star Hunter, they just left her aboard. Killjoy could fly the launch craft, so he flew them down to low orbit where the Travelers leaped out and into the depths towards Seven's base and the final confrontation, thus ending Chapter 9. Overall, we really did enjoy this chapter, and it can go a lot of different ways, a lot of different routes that the Travelers might take, or whatever their situation is at the beginning of the chapter. You know, are they fugitives in a stolen ship? Are they fully pardoned with an Imperial warrant? Or, different adventures that they might encounter along the way. And my players, they threw me for a bit of a loop by picking up a fuel bladder and just pretty much bypassing all that stuff altogether, than just going straight into the 40th Squadron's territory. My biggest complaint was the issue with the map. Gas giant that's not supposed to be there, then saying they're looking for a garden world when the only planet out of the 8 candidates that actually qualifies as an actual garden world is the very planet that they're looking for. I feel a good, really cool foreshadowing Game Masters might want to add to this campaign is to introduce Nvor during Chapter 6. Maybe as an initial ally that they encounter, like he's a messenger, but then by the end of that chapter, mention how Nvor sided with the Suns, and now these two brothers are on opposite sides of this conflict. My big suggestion for this one is if the Travelers end up at Aethgors Palace, they might not encounter the 40th Squadron at all, but if they end up there, and then the Church comes to collect them, and the Travelers have their shimmer suits, really jack up the combat here. The shimmer suits are insanely powerful. You're immune to all lasers, and kinetic damage is reduced to 1/4. They had a +4 to your dex, so the Travelers are probably going to be winning a lot of their initiative rolls, so Game Masters can easily boost up the power levels of the bad guys without adding too much risk to the player characters. Remember, Disintegrator gauntlets ignore armor, so give the players some seriously armored opponents. That way the players can really just enjoy kicking their asses because their armor doesn't mean anything. Give them a fight that would be completely impossible to survive under normal conditions, and now they're strolling through auto laser fire of rifles without a care as everything around them is just exploding. Just go over the top and let your players enjoy being complete badasses here. Okay, well that is it for this episode. Join us next time for the big finale when the Travelers face off against Seven, Uncle Vlyn, and get to make a decision that changes the course of chartered space forever in Chapter 10, Grandfather Lies. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of our stuff, such as game reviews, or how-tos, or the thrilling conclusion to this 10-part campaign diary, just hit that subscribe button. Till next time, Travelers, you have a great day. It is a really weird trend how in your previous Traveler campaign diary, the mystery of BT-SHT-365, that involved your players shoving a prisoner into a cryobirth and just kind of forget about him forever. Your players, they have got a winning formula for dealing with some jerk that they're kind of afraid to kill, but they don't want to ever think about again.